live in Austin, and Austin has a lot of fantastic things to offer. So hopefully you've had an opportunity to explore some of our music, Austin City Limits, South by Southwest, and you've also got to experience January. So this is highly unusual. So before we get into my presentation, I wanted to describe a little bit about how I got involved with blockchain. So a few years ago, I read an article on blockchain. The word captured my attention, and I decided to research it more in depth, pure curiosity. That then led me to start having conversations with my wife, and bless her heart, she listened to me and all of these ramblings I had on the topic of blockchain. And her and I eventually, after a couple of hundred of hours or so of research and watching YouTube videos, we built our first cryptocurrency miner. Now, that's important because it enabled us to understand what a blockchain was, the underlying technology, everything from proof of work to proof of stake, the software components that are laid on top of that computer, and then ultimately my understanding that this computer that we built is a node in a decentralized network. So it helped me bring the conceptual thinking around blockchain into reality through the creation of this particular computer. And over the past year and a half, my wife and I have continued to build these computers. We have several of them, but more importantly, we continue to have conversations with my clients, her and I, others in the room, about the importance of blockchain and what it can do. So I want to thank you again, and on behalf of all the women in digital, regardless of what they do with digital, I'd like to give them a round of applause. All right, so jumping into it. It's highly likely that you have heard the word blockchain in some way, shape, or form. And throughout the several years that I've been studying the topic, I found it easiest to then otherwise break it apart into 4 distinct layers. So on the screen from left to right, we start to think about blockchain as the distributed blockchain ecosystem. It is not a singular thing. It is many things. Blockchains themselves are platforms, so they're networks. We think about blockchains that IBM come out with that are private blockchains. We have public blockchains such as Ethereum. These are different platforms in general that we can then drive conversations on creating applications such as storage and infrastructure. So I'm encouraging you to read this left to right. When we start with a platform, we can then move to storage and infrastructure. And one of the common phrase is decentralized applications, or dApps. One of the more interesting applications of blockchain is a smart contracting mechanism. So anyone in this room who has bought a house or a car, executed any kind of transaction requiring a contract, you realize that there's a lot of paperwork associated with that. There's a lot of transactions, a lot of intermediary functions that are otherwise in the value chain to execute that transaction. In its purest form, a smart contract is an automated contract that's self-executing with terms that log all data transactions within a blockchain. And then finally, distributed applications. These happen to be consumer and enterprise applications, and probably almost everyone in the room has a phone. You have mobile apps on your phone. It may be important to some of you where that mobile app came from or how it was built, but at the end of the day, it's likely you don't. And this is where distributed applications come into play. They are otherwise applications that we as consumers use or enterprises use that are built with the underlying structure on a blockchain platform. And so throughout my own personal research and hobbies with blockchain, different technologies, earlier this year I wanted to, with ISG, validate some of my thinking or invalidate some of our collective thinking. And lo and behold, there's always talk of low adoption or slow adoption of blockchain. And so when I kind of peeled into this, it's not that people don't necessarily understand what blockchain is, especially if we break it down in 4 layers and start to have a conversation. It's that it's often not clear on what the value proposition of the technology is. There's no defined success metrics. People are struggling with how to identify who in their organization should help get these programs moving forward. However, the number of responses that we received also indicated that there is still interest in the technology. It wasn't as though we've discovered that people were not interested in blockchain. And many of you have probably heard of Bitcoin, but you've also heard that financial services institutions are adopting blockchain technology. They've all structured consortiums, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase, the Bank of Santander. So the financial services industry was the early pioneer. And what we're seeing today through our conversations with clients, various research outlets, are that supply chain are emerging as a very prominent use case for blockchain technology and applications. However, there's still lack of skills to identify the right parties that can give guidance to these clients on how to implement the technology and how to create the value proposition around it. So because it's a newer technology, there is research being done, but even when I myself go do research online or otherwise, it's very difficult to get through some of the clouded messages that are very prominent throughout the web. But again, on a positive note, over 40% of respondents cited that smart contracts happen to be an area of most interest to them, which aligns back to supply chain, because if we think about supply chain, we have a lot of contracts associated. So, what does this all mean, or the so what behind this? In breaking apart what enterprise stakeholders are trying to communicate, or at least giving them value propositions around the technology, what is it that helps them be more capable? They want to understand how blockchain can underpin Enterprise 4.0. How can they create value? What's the return on these investments? How does blockchain impact our overall enterprise? How can we grow our business? How can we reduce spend on third-party intermediaries that spend a lot of time with contracts? How do we increase cash flows? How can blockchain and its use cases align back to our enterprise strategy? So over the summer, I worked with a client, understood their business challenges, and then helped explain to them where technology could effectively fit into their strategy and drive enterprise value. So these are messages that we're starting to see as common themes across all industries. How does blockchain help secure data? Is it an opportunity for organizations to sunset legacy applications? Every day, it seems as though we hear of a new data breach and new security threats. And recently, I was at a conference and learned more about how organizations are using blockchain to differentiate themselves in the way that they use ERP systems, and they have traditionally used those ERP systems. And then ultimately, how do these organizations use blockchain to drive new revenue streams? I've seen statistics that say that 70% of the short-term value proposition around blockchain technology is in IT cost reduction or cost reduction in general. However, the mid to long-term value proposition around blockchain is revenue and value creation. So creating new differentiating products and software solutions. So throughout our research and talking with clients, we've developed as ISG Blockchain Now. So we have 6 solutions that help bridge the gap between what the clients need in order to move forward with their blockchain journey. So ISG, because of our core skill sets and sourcing, Clay Calhoun will speak to this shortly after me, but we're going to go to market and put our sourcing advisory solutions aligned with blockchain technology. So how do we work with clients to source blockchain technology from providers? The market is hyper emerging, and we want to make sure that they have an outlet to come to when they have questions regarding the software and the technology itself. The second is around use case designs. So over the summer, I worked with a client in the manufacturing space in New York City. They jokingly told me that they had no use for Bitcoin when I brought up the word blockchain. However, because we spent some time with them and understood their business challenges, we effectively shaped their use case. So when we hear about blockchain use cases, they're very high level. Digital identity, rights management, financial transactions, these things are very, very high level. So what we, as ISG Blockchain Now, will go to market with our clients and deliver our use case designs, sitting down, understanding where the opportunities are, the business challenges, and ultimately shaping what the technical solution and architecture for a blockchain application should look like. So if we think back to my earlier slide in the 4 layers, platform, distributed applications, smart contracts, storage and infrastructure, we don't need to boil the ocean with all 4. Some clients may only need 1. Some clients may need 3. However, we, as ISG Blockchain Now, will enable those clients to make a decision based on their use case designs on how to develop the technical solution, which has already been done. We've done this. And then the next question, after we have gone through this process with clients, is determining what the investment business case is. Alex, we really like what you did. You helped us understand what our problems are. You helped us build an application. You helped us build an application really fast. We did it in 8 to 10 weeks. But how much is it going to cost us to actually take this application and make it production worthy and enterprise worthy? So we work with the organizations to identify the investments that are necessary in order to develop the applications. And then as we progressed along with our clients as ISG Blockchain Now, the common theme that we have heard a lot of over the past 2 days is change management, organizational design, process governance. These are all things that are core to ISG. These things are in our blood. And when we think about deploying new technologies within any organization, technologies are as good as your approach and project management around operationalization. And then finally with research. Here in a few minutes, I'm going to invite my colleague to the stage to give a little bit of insight into what ISG have already discovered with research. But because research is such a key part of understanding blockchain, having spent several years personally on it, we know as ISG Blockchain 1 that the market will continue to evolve and unfold. We continue to see new companies come into the space. And that's not going to stop anytime soon because there's such a big opportunity that if you have the right people that understand a specific market or industry, they're very quick to come up with a new solution. And this has been demonstrated over the past 18 months just based on investments into the technology, which we're going to talk about here momentarily. But before I move on and how ISG Blockchain Now helps bridge the gap between our clients and their understanding of the market and what they need to be successful, I want to take a step back in history and encourage you all to think about where you were in the early 90s and how the World Wide Web was effectively shaped. The World Wide Web of information really got its adoption and support by industry consortiums that were developed. The consortiums aligned themselves because they found value in pushing this World Wide Web forward. They wanted to define the best practices and otherwise shape a market. That is actively occurring today, and it has been occurring now over the past several years where these industry consortiums continue to take shape. Again, initially in the financial services industry, but now in the automotive industry, manufacturing space, et cetera. So if we move forward to today and we think about the value proposition around the industry consortiums, what those groups of people did back in the 90s to shape the World Wide Web, now we're in the World Wide Web 2.0 of value creation. And so we believe that much like the big financial institutions who are aligning themselves together to define best practices, that the opportunities are also prevalent in manufacturing and also energy and other industries. So we as ISG believe that there's a lot of value to be had by building a community of us, service providers, clients, ISG, so that we can begin to take and shape the best practices around blockchain and sourcing. And if that's not convincing, then hopefully this will be. This is actively happening now. So at the University of Texas, probably about 5 or 6 months ago, I was asked to give a presentation. And up to that point in time, I spent a lot of time trying to convince people of what blockchain was. And it kind of got draining. There's a lot of critics. I've seen a lot of critics. I've heard a lot of skeptical questions. I've seen and heard it all. But when I walked into that room of 50 students, I didn't have to give a presentation. I had 50 hands all raised concurrently, ready to talk and contribute. There are 10 universities in the United States now that offer blockchain programs. The University of Texas, Austin has its own consortium. The students are driving the market. I get a lot of information from the students themselves. So I just want to make it clear that this is very much a reality. The students are not stopping, and there's a lot of value to be had and understood through them. And so how can we collectively work together? Well, we believe that there are clients in various phases of exploring blockchain in general. There are clients that are in the pre-evaluation phase. They're confused. There's a lot of noise and fake news. There's a lot of talk of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoins and people stealing people's wallets. These things are spooky and scary. But I've had them happen to me, and they're not that scary. I'm not proud that, I've had some little cryptocurrency stolen in a wallet, but that's okay. But there are clients that are in the pre-evaluation phase. But we also have those clients that are technology ready. Clients that understand enough about the technology to be dangerous. They can explain to you the difference between a private network, a public network, a federated network, what IBM is doing as opposed to Oracle, what an as-a-service model means. So these clients are at least aware of the market, they're interested, but then as they progress along their own blockchain journey, they become value ready. So blockchain 2.0. These organizations have understood and are aligning the technology solutions back to their enterprise strategies and specific use cases. Not supply chain in general, but an element of supply chain. So they understand where they want to drive value. They've understood the 4 layers that I spoke to earlier, and now they know how to drive to business ready, blockchain 3.0. These organizations are putting proofs of concept into their organization. They're ready to go, but they realize that they still need to work towards operationalization, and there's a lot to be learned. So realizing that not all clients are equal, they all kind of fall into one of 3 to 4 primary areas. And so, being business ready, the question then becomes, why is this important to you all? Those clients that are business ready have clearly understood the market potential for blockchain. It's huge. The global market for blockchain can be broken down and addressed for any organization, large or small, that has a database. Any organization with a supply chain. Any organization that has contracts, that processes financial transactions. 2 months ago, I was on a CFO.com webinar, and ahead of the call, I'm sure some of you have been on these, before they open the line, they put you on the bridge with your fellow panelists. And the panelists started joking while I was on the phone with them. They're like, there's no way anybody can explain blockchain in less than 10 words. And I was starting to think to myself, well, I've got one upstairs in my room. I have a distributed node. And what is that? It's a computer. It's a database. That computer upstairs has the exact same information as the one of its like and kind in China. It's a database. That's it. And so while not all organizations need a blockchain, they could probably find value in some type of application associated with it. What I've done is, through my work with ISG Blockchain Now, is come up with a very simple diagram. And there are lots and lots of these diagrams floating around. But the genesis is, if you have a client or we are ourselves skeptical of the technology, ask yourself these 4 questions. If you get to the end, then you might have some area within your business that you could segment out one of those 4 layers and deploy the technology to create value creation for your organization. So in closing, trying to break down the capability model that I showed earlier, blockchain 1.0, taking and enabling clients on the technology landscape, facilitating their activities around sourcing, giving them guidance on investment case development, and enabling them and keeping them abreast with current research. Research on blockchain that's 3 months, 4 months old, that's different than what it's going to look like 2 weeks from now. It's probably one of the most difficult markets I've ever had to try and keep up with because there's so many use cases that come out every day. But when we, as a community, enable our clients as ISG Blockchain Now and within our community, we can get them to blockchain 2.0. It's not difficult. I won't stand up here and explain to you all the consensus protocols that are associated with blockchain, but I'm pretty sure that we can all figure out a way to take a technology solution and align it to value-creating opportunities. What are your enterprise goals? We can get you there. Because if you're not innovating, then what are you doing? I sat in a presentation 2 months ago with the chairman and founder of FedEx. He gave a brilliant presentation. FedEx is trying to otherwise put all packages within decentralized ledgers. It was incredible. So that said, he encouraged me in his presentation that yes, it is possible to get to the enterprise strategy layer with applications. We as ISG Blockchain Now can help our clients with the use cases, enable them with strategies around operationalization, help them develop the blueprint and the prototype, and then keep them knowledgeable of the market trends through research. Now, while this slide may look limiting, it is not limited to 3 phases. What I'm describing here is one proof of concept. Because if we can teach our clients, as ISG Blockchain Now, how to fish, there are plenty of opportunities to create smart contracts for a supply chain, a financial transaction, a back office function, tracking parts through the supply chain for warranty claims, creating immutable audit logs for parts all over the place. So this isn't as though blockchain 3.0 is the end. We are only at the beginning. And we as ISG Blockchain Now believe that we have a long way to go and that this technology will continue to advance, especially as the market begins to understand how we can segment the different applications of blockchain and apply them to practical business challenges. So that said, I would like to thank you all for your time. I appreciate it. I'm extremely passionate about the topic, so I look forward to questions. And now I would like to welcome Erik Aase to the stage so we can have a conversation around some of the
Alex, Paul, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful, thank you. How are you?
Good. Those of us with 2 first names, we have to bond together, right?
Exactly.
Nobody quite gets
right.
it, so.
Here we are.
Yeah, here we are.
All right. Well, Erik is a director within ISG Insights or ISG Research, and we look forward to having a conversation with you about some of the things that you've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I look at it, the market has changed so dramatically over the last 18 months. It was about 18 months ago that within research we were asked if we were going to cover blockchain. And so I started attending many of your conferences like I always have, and I would ask, oh, who's covering blockchain? And literally it was like, oh, someone in a back closet or, way back buried can talk to you about it, but it's not really something that we're talking about. And it was really kind of Peter Pan and Tinkerbell-ish. I mean, there was a lot of just fairy dust out there, and nobody really had anything to talk about. A year later, completely different. Now as we go to your conferences, you're ready to talk about it and you actually have evidence. So when we were asked by senior management to consider a quadrant about blockchain, what we decided is not to put, like our other studies, a whole series of quadrants, but just to concentrate on one. So we want to kind of understand what it is that you're doing, what progress you've made, and it's really tremendous. The study is part of our digital business transformation study. It's going to come out in a couple of months, and we've already discovered a lot of things. So we're ready to support Alex Paul and the Blockchain Now program because we've got the research. All of you have been very good at bringing forward your case studies as well as the evidence of what it is that you're doing.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for coming on stage. So let's start with the very first question.
Yes.
So what are some of the mega trends that you have seen?
So the mega trends, we are seeing a couple of different, levels of maturity. I guess that's the best way to describe it. And I'll bring up the 5 different ones that we're seeing. So the first would be sort of the full-scale providers. And do you want to click through, or you can just click through all of them? So what we're seeing with companies like IBM and Wipro, you are showing us that it's not just a proof of concept or even a pilot, but it's now a full enterprise solution that you're offering to your clients. And you are offering quick start templates, you have products, you have case studies, you have things that you can actually show the client, and that's making a big difference. Then we've got sort of the big 5 consulting firms, firms such as Accenture or Capgemini. You are starting to establish your practices, is what you're telling us, and you're developing those solutions. You're even starting to develop the as-a-service offerings, and you're taking some big steps. And so, again, we see some good offerings in how you are delivering those solutions. Now, in the big 5 consulting accounting firms, such as KPMG, PwC, Deloitte, they have taken some big steps in certain areas, such as financial services, legal and banking areas, and so maybe a little bit more advanced, but very limited to those particular industries. So good case studies and actually ones that other industries are using as evidence. So it's not just about Bitcoin, or as you were saying, right, that they actually are seeing improving other applications. Then we have the sort of medium and large firms such as DXC, Hexaware, Softtech, that are starting to show some solutions. They're backing them by tools that they're developing, as well as same fast start templates, and starting to talk about delivering as a service, but not quite ready to deliver it yet. But then the most interesting is this overwhelming number of small niche startups. And they're all over the place, and they offer very, very specific solutions. Most of them are still in the point of proof of concept, even maybe some pilot, but the issue is they don't have the bandwidth to be able to deliver. So what we see is a huge opportunity for acquisition. So if you think about all of the digital movements that's happened over the last couple of years, and so many of the acquisitions that all of you in the room, your firms have done, we believe we're going to see the same thing with these small niche firms, because they don't have really the opportunity to be successful unless they find a parent, a funding, venture capitalists, or firms like you that acquire. So those are really the trends that we're seeing, and kind of a maturity curve, but everyone going to the same direction.
All right. Thank you. Moving along. So what are some of the key issues that providers should be aware of, or that you're hearing out there in the market?
So one of the biggest ones is just how specific industry knowledge is key to making this successful. So when we looked at it, we looked across all the industries and we thought, okay, normal ones like manufacturing, BFSI, healthcare, life sciences, but we even had to break them down. So yes, we're looking at manufacturing, but we're looking at banking separate from financial services, separate from insurance, because they're on different maturity levels, all three. When we look at, energy, we're looking at chemical versus oil and gas versus utilities. Again, very different levels of maturity. We're seeing areas and evidence in retail, healthcare more advanced than life sciences, travel, transportation, and business services. So your comments about how important the industry is very critical, because you're going to see a difference between all of those industries. Second, no one size fits all, but solutions fit many. And so a lot of these fast start templates and things that you are all creating are being used across the board. And there's still a lot of development, there's still a lot of discovery that's happening. Communities of use are key, and we heard that from all of you, that your clients are feeling much more comfortable if they're able to see their fellow clients and have those conversations. And the more that you can enable those, the better success we're all going to have, because no one's going to do this back in the closet. This is one of those examples where everyone wants to talk. They're not trying to keep what they're doing secret. They want to talk openly about it, because it's going to take a collaboration for this to work. So they realize that there has to be a community. And that's one of the key things that we heard from many of you, that you're enabling that, and that's enabling our clients to take things forward. Fourth is just the resource issue. And it's not just for you, it's for the client. So you might think you're out trying to scour the market to get the best blockchain people. Well, so are the clients. And so that's an issue that everyone's going to have to deal with, is how are we going to bring that up? So your example of the 10 universities here in the United States, and there's many across the world actually, which I know you know about, that's going to be key. And what's really important, and we're already hearing it from you, and we're also hearing it from industry, is the companies that are investing in those universities. They're putting dollars into helping plant the trees and grow the forest, because blockchain experts are not going to fall out of the sky. Nobody has an Alex Paul. Nobody has people that do this on the weekend and with their wife. I mean, that's just crazy. But we need
Agreed.
to find those kind of people, and that comes from investment, what you're doing, your partnerships with the universities, what big corporations are willing to do, because we all realize that we have to jump ahead of it. And then the last one was the acquisition play. That for you especially, you need to look, and I think that our blockchain now is going to be a valuable resource for you, because we're connecting with those small firms.
Right.
So we're trying and starting to identify them. They're being invited to our consortium. So those are opportunities for you to cherry pick and pick some of those best innovative companies and help them take their ideas forward.
Fantastic. Thank you. That was great. I always enjoy hearing you speak to the research and helping validate some of the things that we see.
Yeah, we're a little passionate about it as well.
Tell.
So it's a great quadrant, a little commercial for it. It's coming out end of November. It's part of our digital transformation study, and I think that you're going to be very impressed with yourselves and all the things that you're doing. I know many of you know what your competitors are doing, but it's a great report, this one quadrant, very, very interesting.
Fantastic. I think we're excited. I'm excited. So let's move on to the third question that we have for you, Jan Erik. So does the in-depth research show any major differences in the blockchain now directions or offerings?
No, thankfully. I was worried that I'd have to come up here and tell you that you were way offline. But everything that we're hearing is very in line with everything that you've just presented today. So it's like you all read each other's presentations. So there's a lot of key things. If you want to advance a couple of slides. So we are finding in the research that everything that ISG is thinking about, is looking forward to, is talking to the community about, is exactly what all of you are doing. that many of the POCs are turning into pilots. Many of those pilots are turning into enterprise scale solutions. That's absolutely what you're seeing. We're not out talking about smoke and mirrors. We're talking to our clients about legitimate solutions that you have on the table and great case studies that we can talk about.
All right.
And then finally, the industry-specific solutions are there. They are rolling out. They're still not in people's heads. They are actually solutions that are ready to go. And we're going to see some remarkable growth in the next 2 years. It is something that you were smart to bring forward, both for ISG as well as for the community, because we really see some change. Just as I mentioned 18 months ago, the difference that we saw when everyone was ready to talk about it but didn't want to talk about it, now you're putting it out in front. As we go to some of these different industry conferences, absolutely blockchain is a #1 topic, whether it was at SAP Sapphire or at Google Next or any of those, it is a major topic so that we know it's something that's on everyone's mind. But like all of these other things that we see advancements, you need those early adopters. You need those people to dip their toe in the water and then be willing to have their case studies written. I'm very impressed that he talked about the money that he's lost. We have to be willing to talk about the things that didn't work as well as the things that did work. That's how we're going to advance the market, and we really see a lot of activity on this across the globe.
Wonderful. And I didn't lose that much.
Good, 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 good. Yeah, of course, he didn't tell us how much he's gained from it either, so.
Well, this is very exciting, and I liked your points, especially about the communities and creating organizations around just shaping the market.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen that happen a lot. Like through all my research on YouTube, which is a great outlet, especially for something like blockchain, because there's not a lot of research out there. I have to sort through hours and hours of information just to figure out what's fake and what's remotely true. And it's great that you are bringing forward these insights that you have, and especially around this concept of community establishment, because I believe that the communities will continue to take shape. You know, we look at, there's an organization that started in Germany with BMW aligning themselves with GM and Ford so that they can drive supply chain and logistics OEM best practices. That's crazy, right?
With the OEMs, right?
Yeah, and then we look at FedEx working with UPS. So these big organizations that have historically been competitors, they're starting to kind of converge together and share information because they have an interest in moving the market forward collectively.
Well, and it's a little interesting because, as you pointed out, there's a negative side to this that we have to get over and get over that fast. Because everyone has in their head what it is, but what they don't know is what it's turned into.
Correct. And I typically, just for the audience's benefit, I would typically not make any reference to Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies because I don't talk about that stuff with clients because it is very confusing. You know, we as ISG Blockchain now have a very much aligned focus on what the enterprise can do with it, and it's not around tokenization.
Right.
And to your earlier comments, even while talking to a university professor, this particular professor has always challenged me to say, he's always saying, well, why blockchain? Why blockchain? And I responded to him several times, like, why not?
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing to progress it forward? How can we do something today, now? And that's always been my market message with him. So he's very much intellectual.
Yeah, good.
Fantastic.
So we should ask some questions,
Yeah.
or
Do we have any questions?
let the audience ask us some questions.
Guys, thank you very much. We've got time for one or two questions.
Looks like we got
So we've got some mics in the audience, I think. There we go. Anybody? Oh, come on. We got to have one or two. There we go.
There's a number of use cases out there related to IoT and blockchain. What's your perspective on the applicability of blockchain into IoT?
For our report that we just published on IoT earlier this year, there were a lot of references that were brought up, and we contemplated whether we needed to split that out, and we chose not to. As we are now launching the next series, which will come out next month, you'll see that there is a quadrant that will be dedicated to the use of blockchain within IoT. So a really good question, and definitely we're seeing some movement there.
Yeah, and I'll take that question as well. So earlier this year, MIT came out with a publication, and the whole publication magazine was dedicated to blockchain, which is interesting now because I've had a group that's associated with MIT reach out to me, and we're starting to talk a little bit more about blockchain and how we could collaborate with them as well. So it's exciting to see these institutions, these universities, starting to reach out to industry professionals for insight. But on the topic of IoT with blockchain specifically, I worked with a client over the summer, and what we tried to do was leverage blockchain technology to track the provenance of parts through the supply chain. So when that part left the factory, where did it go? They happen to manufacture component parts that are installed in buildings, and specifically elevators. But how do you really know where that part went? How do you know how long it was installed? How do you know that the warranty claims were effectively addressed for these component parts? And so in trying to come up with a solution to that question, of course we were able to figure out how to log the data in a blockchain, but we did it by digitizing the actual component part.
Yeah.
So if we look at Amazon Web Services, they have an IoT platform. So we just started digitizing parts. And then we could track them through the supply chain. So now we can connect these component parts and make them talk to each other as IoT smart objects. And so to address the question specifically, is there a connection between blockchain and IoT? The answer is absolutely yes. And the two are absolutely converging. And according to an article at MIT, which really got me to think about this question, was if in fact everyone are talking about how big the IoT market is, with billions of devices processing billions of transactions, how can they ever do it through a centralized ledger?
Yeah.
It's virtually impossible. It's too cost prohibitive. So the distributed ledger technology will absolutely support the deployment and growth of the IoT market, and there is evidence to show that these two topics are very much aligned.
Yeah, a great example that one of you shared with us for those of you that are sports memorabilia fanatics, like Phil here. He's got all sorts of baseball cards and things hidden in his closet. But now you can track signed sneakers and footballs and basketballs and jerseys using IoT to have a tracker and using blockchain to be able to share it through the auction houses because they go for big money.
Confirming the provenance of the item then.
Exactly. Yeah. So things you wouldn't have imagined and even know that there's a business, but big money, and this trust factor is something that IoT can't do on its own, but blockchain then establishes that network of those who buy and sell, and all of a sudden you've got a market. So that's just one of so many examples that we're seeing. Many of them you can't even fathom. So
Beautiful.
Exciting, really exciting stuff.
Good. Guys, we have a minute
Bill,
left. Let's take one more.
Question. Can I sneak in one final question? We're going to Clay, and that is, we have 225 people here over 3 days. We have 50 unique companies. My question for all the providers in the room and those who are out doing some one-on-ones, this consortium that we are creating, the community, how do we ensure, I would say not 100%, but maybe 80% of our provider colleagues have something going on in blockchain? How do we make sure that if they have a desire, how do they form part of this consortium? Because I can remember 3 years ago, many of you were in Dallas, and the word digital was just evolving. Now we have 3 years later, we're in Austin. Blockchain is beginning to evolve. We know how fast digital took off. How do we make sure that we can get our colleagues in the provider community that want to participate into this consortium? Because I think it can be very powerful over the next 12, 24 months in particular. So is there a mechanism or a way that our colleagues can think about joining this consortium so we can get both clients, our providers, et cetera, and really make this robust in the next 30, 60, 90 days? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, fantastic question. And the answer is we are actively developing a communication that we can share with all those in the room and broader within our organizational outreach program. So expect to hear something shortly. I'll be here the rest of today. Feel free to come up and ask me questions. And yeah, stay tuned.
Beautiful.
All right.
Alex, Paul, Jan, Erik, thank
All
you
right.
very much.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it. Well
much.
done.
Thank you.
Nice job, guys.